Welcome to the Story Den of Horror. Everyone has had a close call of their own in some way or form, and that's helped shape them into the people they are today, particularly around our trust in strangers. Tonight's video are real stories, including my very own, and from people I know personally, who have had an eerily close call, and wonder till today, what if? About 10 years ago, a massive storm hit our city and we lost power. Thankfully, my grandparents' house still had some, so we packed our essentials and headed over there so we could have dinner and go to school the next morning. My mum was going to take the day off the next day to sort out our house with the insurance company and clean it up, etc. I was a junior in high school, what we call Year 8 here in Australia. We wear uniforms too, so people generally know if you're a high school student or not. I walked to school, and although my grandparents' place is further away, I insisted of walking to school all the same. I put in my earphones and headed out that way. I still had a Walkman, so I only had 16 tracks, but hey, that was a lot for a CD. I was in my own world when I noticed a car pulling up beside me. I looked over and I made eye contact with this guy, staring at me menacingly through his passenger window. It instantly freaked me out. I looked around, but there was nobody. To make things even worse, I suddenly noticed how every single house in that neighborhood looked eerily abandoned. It was overgrown, and it looked like it was all shuttered up. I kept walking. I tried to ignore that guy, but out of the corner of my eye, the car matched the speed I was walking. Eventually, I get ahead of the car and cut through a park, passing some boulders which would prevent the car from following me any further. My heart was racing, and my feet went cold. I turned around. The guy had gotten out of his car, and he started power walking after me. The thought crossed my mind that I'd never see my mum or anyone I knew ever again, but it was that very thought that made me sprint out of there. As I ran past a playset in the centre of the park, a big biker-looking guy was walking his dog. He cocked his head up at the guy following me and locked onto him as he headed his dog in that direction. Then the guy made eye contact with me as I sprinted out of the park and back on my way to school. I turned and looked back. The guy who was following me had headed back towards his car and gotten back in while the big guy stared him down. I made it safely to school that day, and I texted my mum to tell her to pick me up from school. I didn't tell her why, but I just said I'd feel better if she picked me up. I still can't help but think what would have happened if nobody had come past that day. Back in 2003, when MSN Messenger was a thing, you could view someone's MSN profile connected to their ID. You used to be able to search for someone of any age, view their profile and picture, and add them as a friend to chat on MSN. So being unpopular in high school, I would fuck around with it and add some random chicks and chat with them. The worst case scenario, in my case, was being put in the friend zone, which I didn't mind. Ideally, I was looking for love. So I ended up finding this chick online called Mel. She was in my city and a couple of years older than me, but on the other side of the city, so it would be effort to see each other as we both legally couldn't drive yet. I was 14, she was 16. We were both in high school. We escalated from chatting online to chatting on the phone. She sounded hot, but other than how we described ourselves to the other person, I had no idea what she actually looked like. It was 2003, so technology wasn't quite there, well at least affordable yet, with digital cameras and getting photos on your computer, etc. Things were moving a little faster than I was comfortable with, but I figured because she's older, she's more eager to want to have sex or get up to stuff, and I just needed to suck it up. I told my best mate about her, and he talked to her on the phone a couple of times before, and he agreed, she sounded hot. That kind of made me feel somewhat safe about meeting the girl. So when she wanted to meet up in person for the first time on a weekend, I made it a double date kind of thing where she'd bring a friend and I'd bring my mate. The plan was to crash at his uncle's place, who was away for the weekend. It was a bit late and my parents were a little confused about why I wanted to go to my mate's place at like 8:30 PM at night with no prior notice, but they pulled through and dropped me off to his place. Now came the next part. Meeting up with Mel and my mate hooking up with a friend. We spoke again on the phone as she took the train over to the train station near his uncle's place. She told me she was wearing a purple top with a white skirt and her friend is taller and blonde. We headed towards the train station, which was on the main road on the opposite side. As we approached, we decided to hang back in the darkness of the trees so we could watch the people get off. We waited till Mel and her friend got off the train, and oh boy, did they ever. I saw her. She had left out a few details which my friend thought was hilarious. The reason he was laughing so hard was because Mel was a very large girl. Not that I have a problem with her size. She had a great personality. We got along really well. The issue was, she was very obviously in her late 50s, and the blonde quote-unquote friend was a tall, heavy-set man with long blonde hair. So, realizing we weren't there at the station, she called me, trying to find us. So we never moved out of those trees. Instead, we wasted their time, like I feel like they wasted ours. But that's when I realized how bad this situation really could have gotten. While they were looking for us, and kept us on the phone, trying to get us to come out, they kept making gestures at a white Ford Falcon station wagon parked on the side of the main road, just outside the train station. I didn't notice it before, but it had pulled out when the train arrived. We ended up walking back to my mate's house, and Mel got shitty at me because we stood them up. She then texted me later, asking if I still wanted to meet up with her. I never responded to any message ever again, and I blocked her on MSN. We lived in a southern suburb of Perth in Australia. My brother was about 3 or 4 at the time, and had a tendency to wander off as kids do. It gets warm in the summers, so we often kept the front door open but the screen door locked to let the cool air in. One night at about 8:30 PM, my brother must have worked out how to unlatch the front screen door, so before we knew it, he wasn't anywhere to be found in the house. We looked for him everywhere for over an hour before our neighbour started shouting outside. Something about it made my parents click, and my mum went outside to see what's going on. My brother had walked out of our yard, which was fenced around the front, and walked over to my neighbour's front verge. My neighbour happened to be walking to his car to get something when he noticed a man on a bicycle approach my brother and trying to pick him up off the ground. My neighbour had shouted bloody murder at him as the guy bolted. Thank whatever higher power you pray to that he was there at that very moment. When I was about 2 or 3 years old, my parents were visiting friends of theirs. I don't exactly remember when we got into the car in the first place, but I remember waking up strapped into the child seat in the back of my parents' hatchback that was parked at the end of the driveway of the friend's house. I saw a teenage boy outside. I'd say he was around 15 or 16 years old, who happened to be walking past on the footpath intersecting the driveway. He noticed me in the back of the car, and I remember wanting to get out to go inside the friend's house and be with my parents. The boy came up to the window and asked if I was okay. I told him my parents are inside, and I asked him if he could tell them I'm awake, but he refused. Instead, He told me to unlock the door of the car. I remember trying to reach for it to pull it up, but I remember the straps getting tighter and tighter, holding me back as I tried to reach for the lock. I told him I couldn't reach it, and I politely asked him to knock on the front door and just tell my parents I'm awake. He really didn't seem to want to do that, so I took it as he was too shy, and he wanted to help me just unlock the door so he could help me out of the car instead. Again, he told me to reach for the lock, and this went on for like 15 minutes. Then he told me to wind down the window. The window lever was lower down on the door, and there was no chance of me reaching that. So I tried using the palm of my hand to slide down the window. That wasn't going to work either. That's when he calmly told me to try the lock again. All in all, this boy was persistent, and I think we were doing this for over 45 minutes before the security light came on at the front of the house. As soon as it did, I looked for the boy, but he was nowhere to be seen. My mum and dad saw I was awake when they came out and told me they didn't want to wake me, so they let me rest up in the back. Funnily enough, that was also the last time I was left in the back of the car by myself. I wonder if they knew what was going on, but didn't want to worry me. So those were some close calls from people I know personally and my own story. If you liked the video, please give it a like, and if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. I'll be back in a fortnight with a new video, but until then, let me know what you thought in the comments below and follow me on social media. I'll see you guys in the next one.